Hey, what's up, you guys? This is Elias. Before we get started with the video, I just wanted to remind you to make sure you subscribe and like this video. I'm going to talk about today a little bit about how old or what do we think is too old to start jiu-jitsu. And this is something I have a little bit of insight with for two different reasons. One being because, I started jiu-jitsu when I was 26, which is my mid-20s, and then I was able to transition from 20s to 30s, continued throughout my entire 30s, and now I'm in my early 40s. I started teaching jiu-jitsu after my first year, so I started teaching at 27 and then all the way now until 42. So I've ran into a ton of different ages. With that said, I'll tell you a little bit about my history and tell you about where I came from. So when I was 26, I walked into my first jiu-jitsu school. I was brought in by a friend who had mentioned to me that they were having a buddy Saturday. Walked in. I remember on the drive there, I just kind of mentioned to him that, hey, just so you know, I can't kick very high, and I remember him laughing in the car. Had no idea what Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was. It was something that actually I didn't pay that much attention to. UFC and was pretty big in the mid 90s as far as like on Sports Center and different things like that, but more as like it being something like that was a new phenomenon. But the novelty kind of wore out a little bit as far as showing it on any like major sport stations, and there was a lot of controversy because it was the first time people were seeing like actual punches and kicks thrown without gloves or anything like that on TV. So they actually, I think, banned it on some stations. But anyway, so I wasn't a real big MMA fan when I got involved with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I was more like an American sport fan. And so I just knew that I had watched a ton of Bruce Lee and Kung Fu movies growing up. And I assumed Jiu-Jitsu martial art that we were going to be kicking and punching. And so on the way he laughed and said, don't worry about it. So we tried it out. I remember my first class, I was paired up at the school that I went to. It was a Gracie Baja. It was the Lake Forest location. So it was the former headquarters location. And it was the first day that I went, they pair you up with the senior most and junior most. It's kind of cool because you get the instruction from whoever's teaching. First person that taught the first class that I was a part of was Professor Andre Fernandez. And after you're watching the technique from the instructor, you also then get a little bit of help from whoever you're paired up with. So this day, I just so happened to be paired up with, I had no idea at the time who she was, but her name was Kira Gracie. Now I recognize that she's actually, still to this day, the only female Gracie family member with the black belt. Not only does she have a black belt, but she at that time was already a multi-world champion, and she went on to win more world championships after I started jiu-jitsu as well. And I was paired up with her, had no idea who she was. All I knew was just, shoot. I just remember thinking, I was 244 pounds at the time, and I just remember thinking like, man, are you really going to pair me up with this 115, 120 pound, really petite girl? I was a little embarrassed, to be honest. And we actually, she paired up, we practiced the techniques. At the end, we did a resistance. She attacked my neck 3 times. I'll never forget. 3 times the exact same choke, cross choke. Mind you, I had no idea about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and no idea that the root of the problem was when they start to put their hands into your neck, you have to defend your neck. So I just remember the first time she choked me, just thinking, oh, wow, okay, I might have to be a little tougher with this girl, even though she's small and dainty, she's strong. And so the second time I thought, I'm going to go a little harder. And, she started to wrap her or put her first hand into my collar, into my neck. And again, I had no idea what that meant. And she she put the second hand in and she started choking me again. I tried to push her off and I was just like, man, this girl is strong, not understanding leverage. And the third time, I just remember thinking like, man, that's it. Like, I'm going to have to go rough on this girl. Like, that's it. Like, I don't know who she is, but she's choking me. And I think if to be honest, my ego and pride was definitely taking a hit during that first resistance. And she did the same thing. She put her hands into my neck. Again, I had no idea what that importance was. And she choked me again. The time ran out because we did like a specific amount of minutes and then we switched. So the time ran out or else she probably would have continued to choke me over and over. And I just remember after that class just thinking, wow, you got to, like, this is amazing. If there's someone this size that is out there that can dominate or choke me, then I should probably learn this. And it was solely at that time thought of for self-defense. And so I signed up after my first class. The rest was history. I was sold, and that was 26 years old. I think when you're 20s, when you're in your mid 20s, I think that's a great time to get involved with jiu-jitsu. For me, it was nice because I was in the worst shape of my life at the time I got involved with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and it was something that when I first started, I was 244 pounds, like I mentioned, and I had dropped all the way to 167 pounds. So I had dropped 78 pounds in 10 months. And it was crazy for me. And at the time, within my first 6 months, I had a ton of trials and tribulations in my life at that time. 3 months, the end of March, I started January 26, 2007, and the end of March, March 27th, 2007, my mom passed away. So jiu-jitsu helped bring me through that and help with the emotions that I was having with having my mom pass away. And it was at the time something that was saving me. It was a saving grace. I threw myself into jiu-jitsu and completely engrossed myself in this amazing martial art. And I because of it, and committing myself, training 5 or 6 days a week, I lost a ton of weight. Mind you, this is when I was also the manager of a restaurant. So I was working, around 52-hour weeks. On top of that, training 5 or 6 days a week. So it was, that for that reason, if you're in your 20s, it's a really nice time to start because you have so much energy. So you can really throw yourself and get yourself involved with it. I would say the hard thing about starting it with my 20s was affording it. Even though I was a manager at a restaurant at the time, I was still living paycheck to paycheck. And I just remembered the first sign up. At that time, there was the first month tuition, there was the registration fee, plus you had to buy a gi. So at the time, there wasn't even actually Gracie Baja gis in 2007. They hadn't went to the uniform yet. So still, though, you wanted a gi to be able to train in. And so it was really expensive at that time, but I was sold. I was like, sign me up. I'll pay all the costs and I'll deal with the consequences later, which I did. And to afford it was a little difficult. I even remember in the beginning, when I first started, I remember the first month or two, I can't remember exactly what time, but I just remember thinking to myself, man, this is kind of expensive. I loved it. I had a great time. This is before my mom passed, but I think I'm gonna have to put a hold or cancel this because I was, at the time, it was $150 a month, and I was 26 years old, just thinking like, this is maybe a steeper price per month than I anticipated. And I tried to call and get my membership canceled. And luckily, the person at the time who had just came from Brazil when I first started at the Gracie Baja Lake Forest, Professor Flavio Almeida. And I remember having a conversation with him on the phone and him mentioning to me that, Elias, you made a commitment to this for 12 months, which I didn't pay a lot of attention to the signing and realized that I had committed for 12 months, or maybe I realized I committed, but I didn't realize it would be like a contract, something I'd have to follow through with for 12 months. So he let me know it's something I had to commit to. And I just remember at the time, I'm a pretty loyal and committed person, although it was more for financial reasons. So I said, okay, you know what? Like you say, I committed for 12 months. I got 10 more months left. I'll stick with it and, continue with my commitment. And the rest is history. Changed my life. So the cost I would say the biggest obstacle when you're young in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is the cost. So if it's usually a perfect time as far as age goes, but the cost can be a little bit steep sometimes. Now I look at it when I talk to people who are younger, I just say to them, like, just think of it as like sacrificing like a meal. Like, most young kids, I know I did when you're in your 20s, go out and at least go to lunch or dinner at least maybe 3 or 4 times a week. I don't mean both, but just lunch or dinner at least 3 or 4 days a week out of the week. If you save, let's say just maybe a couple, especially nowadays with the cost of a lunch or a dinner, if you save just a couple of those times, you get what I mean. If you're going out a little less and instead maybe shop at a grocery store, that usually will cover what you would pay for your monthly tuition. It's hard to tell a young person that because when I was young, I enjoyed going out and getting lunch and those type of things, but it's going to help with your, with so many different things that you do in your everyday life as far as training. So I think it's an easy commitment now, but at that time, I know it would have been hard to hear, but I made the commitment. I continued with it. And I think when you're young, it's easier physically, but harder financially. When I got into my 30s, that's when, actually pretty soon after I started at 26, then 27, I started being able to be more financially stable and being able to control my money a little bit more, so I was able to afford jiu-jitsu a little easier. So when I got into my 30s, I think when you get into your 30s, the cost is not as difficult. I think you can afford $150 to $200 a month. I think the big thing when you get into your 30s is your body starts to change, right? You start to go through this transition where, things that you were able to do when you were in your 20s or even in your teens were started to become a little bit tighter. 30s is not old by any means. Trust me, I felt like I was in my physical peak in my 30s. I was stronger than any time in my youth when I was in my 30s, and I really not only believed that, but I felt it and the things that I would do at the gym or the things that I would do in jiu-jitsu really proved that to me, just in strength and those type of things. So you have a lot of power, you have a lot of good things in your 30s, but it's easier financially to get involved with jiu-jitsu. And I think the only thing you have to do is just maybe manage your time, because I think when you're in your 30s, like when I was in my 20s, I didn't have any responsibilities, ton of things that I had to be responsible for other than, of course, work. When I was in my 30s, things became, you start to get more financial commitments. You start to get you start to buy homes. You start to, some of you may have bought homes when you were in your 20s, but I didn't start till I was in my 30s. So you start to settle down a little bit. I got married in my 30s, bought my first 2 homes in my 30s, and was able to have kids in my 30s. So you have to start managing time a little bit more. I would say that's probably the biggest obstacle for me in my 30s. And then when I hit my 40s, I think the financial aspect of it to me in my 40s is easy. Like when I see people who come in that are in their 40s, typically they can afford jiu-jitsu pretty easily. Then it's really about management of, I wouldn't even say management of health or management of being sore and those type of things. It's more like managing injuries, making sure that you can prevent injuries, be a little bit careful when you roll. Hopefully you're in an academy that pays attention to that. Still a great time, if anything, one of the best times financially, because 40s you can afford it pretty easily, and if you manage your injuries and stay safe, which I think you can do in your 40s, then you can get through everything pretty easily as far as physically goes, managing your health. 50s, I think the biggest obstacles in 50s, 60s, and even I have some students in the 70s, is just trying to manage injuries, trying to manage your body. And I think the easiest way, when you're in your 50s, 60s, and 70s, what I've seen in my experiences is usually those ages, you're financially stable. For the most part, by that age, or you aren't training jiu-jitsu, but when they come in, they're usually pretty financially secure. I would say 50s, 60s, and 70s, if you can afford it, by then you should definitely mix up your group classes with private lessons. Private lessons are gonna, in my opinion, whenever I have people who can afford private lessons that come in with their 50s and 60s and 70s, it just helps make sure that they can get more longevity out of their jiu-jitsu journey. Not to say that people who do group classes aren't going to have good longevity, but I think in that if you can afford privates, like most people that come and do privates with me that are in their 50s, 60s, they'll do the privates and then they go to the group classes as well. But instead of, let's say, for example, if they train 2 or 3 days a week, normally in a group class, they'll train maybe 1 or 2 days in the group class and then 1 day private, where they know the coach or professor can take good care of them. And then taking the chance when you go to the group class that you're going to be safe and be protected and not get hurt during that 1 or 2 times. But it cuts the odds in half of you potentially getting an injury that could keep you out longer than it would have when you were in your 20s, 30s, teens for sure, 40s, right? So it's something that if you can afford, it's going to help you manage your health, help you manage your body a little bit. And as far as age goes, I don't think there's any bad age to start jiu-jitsu. I think it just really depends on where you are in life. And I think jiu-jitsu, that motto, the thing you hear, jiu-jitsu is for everyone. I really believe in that. I think there's just different ways you have to manage your jiu-jitsu journey. If you come in at any age, even in your 20s, and you're just gung-ho and you just go really hard, it's gonna always, there's always going to be repercussions, right? That you're going to feel just, I would say when you get your 30s and above, you just have to be more careful with that gung-ho mentality and try to think to yourself, you could still come 4 or 5, 6 days a week. I'm not saying that, but just when you train, you have to train a little bit smarter. And I know that's hard to do when if you're new and you've never trained, but that should be the goal. But it's definitely low impact martial arts. So it's something that I think everybody can do no matter the age. So if you're thinking about it, if you're on the fence and you have a local school near you, if depending on what age you are, I would contact them and see what their group classes are like, see what they're offering as far as, is it a sport academy or a self-defense, a school that mixes up sports jiu-jitsu with self-defense, because I think that matters as well, because I think if you go to a school that's just strictly based on sport jiu-jitsu, then you're definitely going to probably have a little bit more intensity, because some of those kids or adults are looking to compete as often as they can. To where if you come to a place like, for example, my academy in Palm Desert, California, we try to focus a little bit on both self-defense and sport jiu-jitsu. So I don't think you have to gear your school towards one or the other. I think you can be good at doing everything. But my point is, look up your school, find out what their strength is or what they like to do, and depending on your age, really look into the considerations of what I just said, which is try to, if you can, maybe if you're in your 50s or above, try to see about private training. And private training doesn't mean you have to go with the black belt. If you're new in jiu-jitsu, you can do a private with the blue belt, and you're going to learn more than you already knew, which is going to help you in the street in a self-defense situation. It's going to give you situational awareness. It's going to give you the fundamentals. Guarantee you a blue belt who in most academies have gotten to that blue belt level has went through the fundamentals of jiu-jitsu and can probably explain it well to you. But of course, whatever is available to wherever you're at, I would get involved with it. So anyway, that's my opinion on ages. If you have a comment or anything, I'm sure I left out a ton of stuff. I just wanted to be quick and give you a little summary of who I am and what age I started at, and the decades now that I've been involved with jiu-jitsu. And I'll be curious to hear about your story, about how often you train or what age you are, and hopefully there's some above 40 guys out there like me that are getting involved with jiu-jitsu and trying to better themselves, strengthen their defense, and make sure they give themselves another tool to defend themselves out there in the wild, man. And I say the wild, but it's our society. So hope to hear from you soon, or make sure you like the video, and I'll be shooting out some more videos, so look forward to those, and talk to you later. Thanks.